Hi, I'm Peggy from Potato Patch Nutrition. We get questions all the time concerning different experiences that horses are having in life. And so I'm going to read one to you today and then give you an answer to it. So if you know someone whose horse or your horse has a similar concern, then maybe we can help more than just this person. Hi, my name is Dawn, and I got your number from Chrissy. My horse has Cushing's and insulin resistance. He currently takes Presend and Thyroid L. And she left me a number, and we actually had a very nice phone conversation about him. And so a couple of things. He's a little bit older horse, and so this is somewhat more common in older horses, the Cushing's is. And actually the insulin resistance is just part of Cushing's. That actually is what starts it. So we went over what he eats for grain, and the main ingredient in the grain that he eats is wheat middlings. And the second one is soybean hulls, which essentially is just the outside of like the soybean where it's just the shell, which would kind of be like eating popcorn shells. So it's just there for filler. It doesn't actually do any good or bad. It's just there to take up space. The main ingredient in this grain for nutrition is wheat, and the wheat gluten molecule does to horses essentially the same thing that it does to humans, and it does cause insulin resistance because of the level of glucose it releases into the system, especially since it's ground. And then Cushing's is just an extension, a furthering of the insulin resistance. A couple of things that we talked about, the Presend is actually a synthetic ACTH, which is a hormone that is produced and used by the adrenal system. And the difficulty with something like that long term, although it does give temporary relief to the horse of some of the symptoms, it doesn't fix the problem, and it does have long-term repercussions, as a lot of medications will. If you keep a horse on ACTH for too long, the adrenals actually will begin to underfunction. And so then it's almost impossible to take them off. So my suggestion to her was to put him on hormone balancer to readdress some of the insulin resistance, and then by extension also the Cushing's that's happening, because that's also a hormone-driven problem. It's comes right down the endocrine system. And then also to change his grain to just straight oats. And if she needs more bloom on him, then alfalfa pellets or alfalfa flakes, a really good higher protein hay is the best way to put weight on a horse. And she was concerned about giving him oats because of the insulin resistance. And so I want to just address that as a question. When I suggest feeding oats, it's important to understand that even though we have horses that we show that are as big as 18 hands and weigh well over 1,500 pounds, that horse, even that horse, only gets 1 pound of oats a day when we're home, because we don't use grain to keep weight or bloom on them. We use grain more as a way to give them their supplements, but also oats do some really amazing things for horses. They're 4% fat, and that fat that's in them is really available to the horse to utilize. And especially with insulin resistance, it's very important to understand that there has to be one molecule of carbohydrate in order to make one molecule of any hormone in the horse's body. So you need some oil or some fat there that is of a natural nature, not a synthetic oil, not a seed oil. And oats is the perfect oil for a horse. And then also oats has 11% protein, so it won't make the babies grow too fast. It won't make them hot if you're feeding a reasonable amount of it. And the carbohydrate that's in oats, the liver can convert to cholesterol. So if there's not quite enough fat, or in what they've ate that day, they can take that little bit of oats and they can, in the liver, convert that starch into that cholesterol that's needed in order to make hormones. So it actually helps to reverse insulin resistance rather than to drive it. And I personally prefer whole oats. And the reason that I prefer whole oats is unless the horse has no teeth, or if it's a baby, then yes, we do use rolled oats for that. But I prefer whole oats for most other horses because the ones that go through the system that you see come out the other end, so to speak, that are still whole, the body actually decides which of those it's going to send through and which of those it's going to completely break down. And what it does when it's sent through like that is it feeds the microbiome at the back of the gut. So part of the reason that we're seeing so much hind gut ulcers and hind gut problems is because there's nothing to feed that microbiome and that good bacteria in the back of the gut. And then there's nothing to protect, the back of the intestine from ulcers. And so some of our over processed grains are driving these ulcers and some of these problems that are at the back of the gut. This horse didn't have that as an issue, or I would have suggested that he be put on tum-tum until that can get corrected, because hind gut ulcers without something that travels to the back of the gut can be very, very difficult to heal. So those are just a couple of things that are good to know, not only about Cushing's, but about what your horse is eating, because wheat middlings is going to, the gluten molecule is going to move into those hormone receptor sites, and it's going to cause insulin resistance, and it's going to cause the Cushing's. So if you have a horse that suffers from insulin resistance or Cushing's, the first thing that I would do is check your grain and see what is actually in it, and then maybe consider changing to straight oats, not only for the cholesterol and the fat in the fat, but also the starch that can be converted to cholesterol, but also to help the gut flora at the back of the gut. So I hope that helps someone. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to us. We are interested in helping all the fur babies of the world. I hope you have a great day.